So today we're going to be talking about my top 5 fun specs in PvP. A lot of this will come down to personal preference, so just a forewarning, but starting it off, and this is in no particular order, like all of these are like equal fun to me, but starting it off is Guardian Druid. The main reasoning being we do decent damage. You can give a lot of team utility with Brambles and Leader of the Pack, which I don't really take in PvP because I find when you do take it, that you actually take too much damage absorbed from your allies. What I'm talking here, somewhere around here, Freedom Protector of the Pack is what it's called. Pretty much you take 20% of all damage done to nearby allies, but it doesn't give the specific range of this ability either, so it could be, I'm assuming 40 yards or 30 yards, but usually if you take this you do take a little bit too much damage, but other than that, it's really tanky. I'll find myself in situations where I 1v4 for a solid like 2 minutes before I die if I time my cooldowns correctly. I'm not even that geared either. 475,000 health isn't bad, but that's with 15% increased max health. Without that buff, I'm guessing it's a lot lower. Or 13. I've been in a battleground where there's an enemy druid that had 870,000 health. And he didn't die. He had 10 stacks of the flag, just used cooldowns, didn't die. So try Guardian Druid out if you haven't already. It's really fun, and I've been having a blast pretty much every time I play this in a battleground. So the next one on the list is Arcane Mage. Anyone knows what Arcane Mage does at this point, but that's, I'd say, one of the main reasons that I like it right now. Arcane Mage is essentially just press one button, do a lot of damage. So it's kind of like every other mage spec, but with this one, you can, I'd say, do the most burst out of all the mage specs if you do it correctly. Hitting 150k non-crits, 75k crits. Or the other way around, you know what I mean though, but you can hit really hard as Arcane if you time all your cooldowns correctly. Especially in battlegrounds with saltwater potions, you can do even more damage than what I'm doing now, like 30% more exactly. And with Berserking, which is another 30%. And then there's flag carrier debuffs on top of that, so that's up to 100% increased damage usually. It's just really fun. It's just like 2 buttons, and then I'd say one of the better things about it too is being able to spell steal on cooldown. Like 6,000 mana, you generate that, or at least half of that, most of the time by the time the next global's up. So this is really good against resto druids, holy pallies. Anyone that has, I guess, heal over time effects, it's really nice to use just to watch them, and then your teammates obviously just drain down their health and you just spell steal every global. It's actually a common tactic in Arena against resto druids, just to make them go fun fact. But yeah, that's one of the reasons, or all of the reasons I like Arcane Mage. One of my favorite classes right now, Fury Warrior. This is the main reason behind it. Enrage, damage done increased by 28%, haste increased by 25%, movement speed increased by 10%, damage taken reduced by 10%. If you really want, you can have 100% uptime on this ability. On top of that, I guess when you do use cooldowns, you do quite a bit of damage. And again, in battlegrounds, and not really Arena, because in Arena you're going to play arms most times, but at least in battlegrounds with Berserking, you can sometimes just melt a healer in a stun. But again, the main reason behind this is the fact that you don't really need a healer in battlegrounds. A lot of these classes you don't really need a healer in battlegrounds, which is something, I mean, I'm fine with having a healer, but I think it's more fun actually having the risk of dying in a battleground rather than just kind of running around and doing whatever and just being a raid boss. But in conclusion, extra haste, damage increased is just kind of insane. You don't need a healer, and if you want to, you can spec into a lot of heroic leaps, which is really fun, but I haven't spec'd into it in a long time, but just crazy self-heals and damage, really. The next one is the guy that I was supposed to main throughout Legion and BFA, but I just kind of gave up on it for some reason. Demon Hunter. Introduced last expansion. It's been, from what I think, kind of under Blizzard's radar of what it's performing like and what it's actually doing. It's kind of a 2-button rotation, but I'm okay with that most times. Other than that, you have a lot of haste. Similar to Fury Warrior, you do gain a lot of haste. 25% haste through the Metamorphosis effect, which does proc quite often. And then you do get haste from a certain trait, which is really broken, 2,851 haste, which does buff my haste to 105%. Just a little side note there. But that's the main reasons it's really good in PvP. Also, really, really mobile. I guess I'll just showcase it here. If you want, you can use Vengeful Retreat in kind of an offensive way sometimes, so that goes about halfway, and then you can just dash after. But that Gap Closer, I'd say that's equivalent of Resto Druid's Sprint ability. That does the, like, Nitro Boots effects, essentially, but really good mobility, really good damage, haste increase. You also gain a decent amount of Leech through Metamorphosis and through a talent that I think I take, Soul Rending. Yeah, Leech increased by 10% at all times, and then when you're in Metamorphosis, you gain 20% haste because it's another 10% in Metamorphosis as well. So, a lot of haste, a lot of self-healing, a lot of damage, a lot of mobility. You also have a Purge, which I think is really good against Resto Druids again. You have a stun, an AoE stun, Chaos Nova, and then you have a single target stun if you're spec'd into it. You also have like a 10-yard range on your interrupt, which you wouldn't think is very helpful, but it is helpful, again, when you're going against something mobile. In other words, a Resto Druid, because those are very uncommon to see these days. And you can see rogues, but I can't think of like one circumstance where that's actually come in handy for me. There's also Fell Lance. I've talked about this in a video, but it just does a shit ton of damage while you're up in there. 10% of the target's health, actually. And then I always forget about Darkness. Darkness, if you're spec'd into it, is essentially a discount Pally bubble. Instead of 100% chance of like being immune to effects, I believe it's 70% if you're spec'd into the other town, which is still really good. 70% chance to not be attacked for about 8 seconds. So try it out if you haven't. And the next one, Ret Pally. I like Ret Pally a lot. I think a lot of people like Ret Pally as well, and there's really one main reason behind that. We do a shit ton of burst damage. This is pretty much the setup on a normal burst rotation. You could do a little bit more, but 96,000 casually. Decent. Very decent. I'm using my Wake of Ashes wrong, just feel free to ignore my gameplay. But yeah, it does a shit ton of damage. You also have a lot of healing, as Ret Pallies naturally do. Every time you use a Holy Power spending ability, such as Templar's Verdict, which you use probably every 4 globals, you generate a stack of Selfless Healer. Selfless Healer pretty much makes it so it reduces the cast time, and I think it increases the healing by a tiny bit as well on your Flash of Light. You can use this on anyone, really, but 36,000 every 4 times you Templar's Verdict. You can use it, I suppose, before 4 stacks as well, but I don't really see people do that often. But you can use it when it has, like, that much of a cast time, which you can get kicked on, but no one I think, has the nuts to do that, really. I've hit upwards of 100k on Templar's Verdict. Other than that, self-healing. You have this shield thing, which, I mean, it does the same damage to person that you absorb. So 73,000 absorbed, 73 done to anyone that breaks the bubble. You also have normal bubble, which just makes you immune. You have blessing and protection, which makes you immune to physical, which isn't good against mages, but good against like anyone else's, you know, physical damage. Lay on hands, everyone knows what this does. Freedom, which isn't really the best anymore, but I think it's okay. Oh yeah, Zandalari Pallies. You can use regenerating in your bubble and generate all of your health back. So you can go from essentially no health to full health in 6 seconds and have 2 lives. So yeah, it's really fun if you haven't tried it out. There's also another underlooked ability when it comes to Ret Pally, which even I barely remember it's a thing, but Retribution. When any party or raid member within 40 yards dies, you gain 20% increased damage, 30% reduced damage taken. This is admittedly good for Mythics raids. Not really so much for Arena, but for Battlegrounds I suppose it's decent. You don't really notice when it's up, unless you like use it when you use your burst and you just think to yourself, oh, that hit a little bit harder than it usually does. So this can line up with, again, Saltwater, Berserking, Wings, and obviously Retribution for decent crits. Thanks for watching the video, guys. If you guys liked it, follow my Twitter. Usually on my Twitter, I'll announce when I go live on my Twitch, which hasn't been so much recently, but eventually we'll get there. As always, guys, thank you. Until next time.